Section 16 of The Art of Public Speaking. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Eisenwein. Section 16. Chapter 16. Methods of Delivery. The crown, the consummation of the discourse is its delivery. Toward it all preparation looks, for it the audience waits, by it the speaker is judged. All the forces of the orator's life converge in his oratory. The logical acuteness with which he marshals the facts around his theme, the rhetorical facility with which he orders his language, the control to which he has attained in the use of his body as a single organ of expression, whatever richness of acquisition and experience are his, these are all now incidents. The fact is the sending of his message home to his hearers. The hour of delivery is the supreme inevitable hour for the orator. It is this fact that makes lack of adequate preparation such an impertinence, and it is this that sends such thrills of indescribable joy through the orator's whole being when he has achieved a success. It is like the mother forgetting her pangs for the joy of bringing a son into the world. JBE, How to Attract and Hold an Audience. There are 4 fundamental methods of delivering an address. All others are modifications of one or more of these: reading from manuscript, committing the written speech and speaking from memory, speaking from notes, and extemporaneous speech. It is impossible to say which form of delivery is best for all speakers in all circumstances. In deciding for yourself, you should consider the occasion, the nature of the audience, the character of your subject, and your own limitations of time and ability. However, it is worthwhile warning you not to be lenient in self-exaction. Say to yourself courageously, "What others can do, I can attempt." A bold spirit conquers where others flinch, and a trying task challenges pluck. Reading from manuscript. This method really deserves short shrift in a book on public speaking, for, delude yourself as you may, public reading is not public speaking. Yet there are so many who grasp this broken reed for support that we must here discuss the read speech, apologetic misnomer as it is. Certainly there are occasions, among them the opening of Congress, the presentation of a sore question before a deliberative body, or a historical commemoration, when it may seem not alone to the orator, but to all those interested, that the chief thing is to express certain thoughts in precise language, in language that must not be either misunderstood or misquoted. At such times, oratory is unhappily elbowed to a back bench. The manuscript is solemnly withdrawn from the capacious inner pocket of the new frock coat, and everyone settles himself resignedly, with only a feeble flicker of hope that the so-called speech may not be as long as it is thick. The words may be golden, but the hearer's eyes are prone to be leaden, and in about 1 instance out of 100 does the perpetrator really deliver an impressive address. His excuse is his apology. He is not to be blamed, as a rule, for someone decreed that it would be dangerous to cut loose from manuscript moorings and take his audience with him on a really delightful sail. One great trouble on such great occasions is that the essayist, for such he is, has been chosen not because of his speaking ability, but because his grandfather fought in a certain battle, or his constituents sent him to Congress, or his gifts in some line of endeavor other than speaking have distinguished him. As well choose a surgeon from his ability to play golf. To be sure, it always interests an audience to see a great man. Because of his eminence, they are likely to listen to his words with respect, perhaps with interest, even when droned from a manuscript. But how much more effective such a deliverance would be if the papers were cast aside. Nowhere is the read address so common as in the pulpit. The pulpit that in these days least of all can afford to invite a handicap. Doubtless many clergymen prefer finish to fervor. Let them choose. They are rarely men who sway the masses to acceptance of their message. What they gain in precision and elegance of language, they lose in force. There are just 4 motives that can move a man to read his address or sermon. 1. Laziness is the commonest. Enough said. Even heaven cannot make a lazy man efficient. 2. A memory so defective that he really cannot speak without reading. Alas, he is not speaking when he is reading, so his dilemma is painful, and not to himself alone. But no man has a right to assume that his memory is utterly bad until he has buckled down to memory culture and failed. A weak memory is oftener an excuse than a reason. 3. A genuine lack of time to do more than write the speech. There are such instances, but they do not occur every week. The disposition of your time allows more flexibility than you realize. Motive 3 too often harnesses up with motive 1. 4. A conviction that the speech is too important to risk forsaking the manuscript. But if it is vital that every word should be so precise, the style so polished, and the thoughts so logical, that the preacher must write a sermon entire, is not the message important enough to warrant extra effort in perfecting its delivery? It is an insult to a congregation, and disrespectful to Almighty God, to put the phrasing of a message above the message itself. To reach the hearts of the hearers, the sermon must be delivered. It is only half delivered when the speaker cannot utter it with original fire and force, when he merely repeats words that were conceived hours or weeks before, and hence are like champagne that has lost its fizz. The reading preacher's eyes are tied down to his manuscript. He cannot give the audience the benefit of his expression. How long would a play fill a theater if the actors held their cue books in hand and read their parts? Imagine Patrick Henry reading his famous speech, Peter the Hermit, manuscript in hand, exhorting the Crusaders, Napoleon constantly looking at his papers, addressing the army at the pyramids, or Jesus reading the Sermon on the Mount. These speakers were so full of their subjects, their general preparation had been so richly adequate, that there was no necessity for a manuscript, either to refer to or to serve as an outward and visible sign of their preparedness. No event was ever so dignified that it required an artificial attempt at speech-making. Call an essay by its right name, but never call it a speech. Perhaps the most dignified of events is a supplication to the Creator. If you ever listened to the reading of an original prayer, you must have felt its superficiality. Regardless of what the theories may be about manuscript delivery, the fact remains that it does not work out with efficiency. Avoid it whenever at all possible. Committing the written speech and speaking from memory. This method has certain points in its favor. If you have time and leisure, it is possible to polish and rewrite your ideas until they are expressed in clear, concise terms. Pope sometimes spent a whole day in perfecting one couplet. Gibbon consumed 20 years gathering material for and rewriting the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Although you cannot devote such painstaking preparation to a speech, you should take time to eliminate useless words, crowd whole paragraphs into a sentence, and choose proper illustrations. Good speeches, like plays, are not written, they are rewritten. The National Cash Register Company follows this plan with their most efficient selling organization. They require their salesmen to memorize verbatim a selling talk. They maintain that there is one best way of putting their selling arguments, and they insist that each salesman use this ideal way rather than employ any haphazard phrases that may come to his mind at the moment. The method of writing and committing has been adopted by many noted speakers. Julius Caesar, Robert Ingersoll, and on some occasions Wendell Phillips were distinguished examples. The wonderful effects achieved by some famous actors were, of course, accomplished through the delivery of memorized lines. The inexperienced speaker must be warned before attempting this method of delivery that it is difficult and trying. It requires much skill to make it efficient. The memorized lines of the young speaker will usually sound like memorized words and repel. If you want to hear an example, listen to a department store demonstrator repeat her memorized lingo about the newest furniture polish or breakfast food. It requires training to make a memorized speech sound fresh and spontaneous, and unless you have a fine native memory, in each instance the finished product necessitates much labor. Should you forget a part of your speech or miss a few words, you are liable to be so confused that, like Mark Twain's guide in Rome, you will be compelled to repeat your lines from the beginning. On the other hand, you may be so taken up with trying to recall your written words that you will not abandon yourself to the spirit of your address, and so fail to deliver it with that spontaneity which is so vital to forceful delivery. But do not let these difficulties frighten you. If committing seems best to you, give it a faithful trial. Do not be deterred by its pitfalls, but by resolute practice avoid them. One of the best ways to rise superior to these difficulties is to do as Dr. Wallace Radcliffe often does: commit without writing the speech, making practically all the preparation mentally, without putting pen to paper, a laborious but effective way of cultivating both mind and memory. You will find it excellent practice, both for memory and delivery, to commit the specimen speeches found in this volume and declaim them with all attention to the principles we have put before you. William Ellery Channing, himself a distinguished speaker, years ago had this to say of practice in declamation: "Is there not an amusement, having an affinity with the drama, which might be usefully introduced among us? I mean recitation, a work of genius, recited by a man of fine taste, enthusiasm, and powers of elocution, is a very pure and high gratification. Were this art cultivated and encouraged, great numbers, now insensible to the most beautiful compositions, might be waked up to their excellence and power. Speaking from notes. The third and most popular method of delivery is probably also the best one for the beginner. Speaking from notes is not ideal delivery, but we learn to swim in shallow water before going out beyond the ropes. Make a definite plan for your discourse. For a fuller discussion, see Chapter 18. And set down the points somewhat in the fashion of a lawyer's brief or a preacher's outline. Here is a sample of very simple notes. Attention. Roman numeral 1. Introduction. Attention indispensable to the performance of any great work. Anecdote. Roman numeral 2. Defined and illustrated. Arabic 1. From common observation. Arabic 2. From the lives of great men. Carlyle, Robert E. Lee. Roman numeral 3. Its relation to other mental powers. Arabic 1. Reason. Arabic 2. Imagination. Arabic 3. Memory. Arabic 4. Will. Anecdote. Roman numeral 4. Attention may be cultivated. Arabic 1. Involuntary attention. Arabic 2. Voluntary attention. Examples. Roman numeral 5. Conclusion. The consequences of inattention and of attention. Few briefs would be so precise as this one, for with experience a speaker learns to use little tricks to attract his eye. He may underscore a catchword heavily, draw a red circle around a pivotal idea, enclose the keyword of an anecdote in a wavy-lined box, and so on indefinitely. These points are worth remembering, for nothing so eludes the swift glancing eye of the speaker as the sameness of typewriting, or even a regular pen script. So unintentional a thing as a blot on the page may help you to remember a big point in your brief, perhaps by association of ideas. An inexperienced speaker would probably require fuller notes than the specimen given. Yet that way lies danger, for the complete manuscript is but a short remove from the copious outline. Use as few notes as possible. They may be necessary for the time being, but do not fail to look upon them as a necessary evil. And even when you lay them before you, refer to them only when compelled to do so. Make your notes as full as you please in preparation, but by all means condense them for platform use. Extemporaneous speech. Surely this is the ideal method of delivery. It is far and away the most popular with the audience, and the favorite method of the most efficient speakers. Extemporaneous speech has sometimes been made to mean unprepared speech, and indeed it is too often precisely that. But in no such sense do we recommend it strongly to speakers old and young. On the contrary, to speak well without notes requires all the preparation which we discussed so fully in the chapter on fluency, while yet relying upon the inspiration of the hour for some of your thoughts and much of your language. You had better remember, however, that the most effective inspiration of the hour is the inspiration you yourself bring to it, bottled up in your spirit and ready to infuse itself into the audience. If you extemporize, you can get much closer to your audience. In a sense, they appreciate the task you have before you and send out their sympathy. Extemporize, and you will not have to stop and fumble around amidst your notes. You can keep your eye afire with your message and hold your audience with your very glance. You yourself will feel their response as you read the effects of your warm, spontaneous words written on their countenances. Sentences written out in the study are liable to be dead and cold when resurrected before the audience. When you create as you speak, you conserve all the native fire of your thought. You can enlarge on one point or omit another, just as the occasion or the mood of the audience may demand. It is not possible for every speaker to use this, the most difficult of all methods of delivery, and least of all can it be used successfully without much practice. But it is the ideal towards which all should strive. One danger in this method is that you may be led aside from your subject into bypaths. To avoid this peril, firmly stick to your mental outline. Practice speaking from a memorized brief until you gain control. Join a debating society. Talk, 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 and always extemporize. You may make a fool of yourself once or twice, but is that too great a price to pay for success? Notes, like crutches, are only a sign of weakness. Remember that the power of your speech depends to some extent upon the view your audience holds of you. General Grant's words as president were more powerful than his words as a Missouri farmer. If you would appear in the light of an authority, be one. Make notes on your brain instead of on paper. Joint methods of delivery. A modification of the second method has been adopted by many great speakers, particularly lecturers who are compelled to speak on a wide variety of subjects day after day. Such speakers often commit their addresses to memory, but keep their manuscripts in flexible book form before them, turning several pages at a time. They feel safer for having a sheet anchor to windward. But it is an anchor nevertheless, and hinders rapid, free sailing, though it drag never so slightly. Other speakers throw out a little lighter anchor by keeping before them a rather full outline of their written and committed speech. Others again write and commit a few important parts of the address, the introduction, the conclusion, some vital argument, some pat illustration, and depend on the hour for the language of the rest. This method is well adapted to speaking, either with or without notes. Some speakers read from manuscript the most important parts of their speeches, and utter the rest extemporaneously. Thus, what we have called joint methods of delivery are open to much personal variation. You must decide for yourself which is best for you, for the occasion, for your subject, for your audience. For these four factors all have their individual claims. Whatever form you choose, do not be so weakly indifferent as to prefer the easy way. Choose the best way, whatever it costs you in time and effort. And of this, be assured, only the practiced speaker can hope to gain both conciseness of argument and conviction in manner, polish of language and power in delivery, finish of style and fire in utterance. Questions and exercises. 1. Which in your judgment is the most suitable of delivery for you? Why? 2. What objections can you offer to A. Memorizing the entire speech, B. Reading from manuscript, C. Using notes, D. Speaking from memorized outline or notes. E. Any of the joint methods. 3. What is there to commend in delivering a speech in any of the foregoing methods? 4. Can you suggest any combination of methods that you have found efficacious? 5. What methods, according to your observation, do most successful speakers use? 6. Select some topic from the list at the end of Chapter 11. Narrow the theme so as to make it specific, and deliver a short address utilizing the 4 methods mentioned in 4 different deliveries of the speech. 7. Select one of the joint methods and apply it to the delivery of the same address. 8. Which method do you prefer and why? 9. From the list of subjects in the appendix, select a theme and deliver a 5-minute address without notes, but make careful preparation without putting your thoughts on paper. Note: it is earnestly hoped that instructors will not pass this stage of the work without requiring of their students much practice in the delivery of original speeches, in the manner that seems, after some experiment, to be best suited to the student's gifts. Students who are studying alone should be equally exacting in demand upon themselves. One point is most important. It is easy to learn to read a speech. Therefore, it is much more urgent that the pupil should have much practice in speaking from notes and speaking without notes. At this stage, pay more attention to manner than to matter. The succeeding chapters take up the composition of the address. Be particularly insistent upon frequent and thorough review of the principles of delivery discussed in the preceding chapters. End of Section 16.
Section 17 of The Art of Public Speaking. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Eisenwein. Section 17. Chapter 17. Thought and Reserve Power. Providence is always on the side of the last reserve. Napoleon Bonaparte. So mightiest powers by deepest calms are fed, and sleep how oft in the things that gentlest be. Barry Cornwall, The Sea in Calm. What would happen if you should overdraw your bank account? As a rule, the check would be protested, but if you were on friendly terms with the bank, your check might be honored, and you would be called upon to make good the overdraft. Nature has no such favorites, therefore extends no credits. She is as relentless as a gasoline tank. When the gas is all used, the machine stops. It is as reckless for a speaker to risk going before an audience without having something in reserve as it is for the motorist to essay a long journey in the wilds without enough gasoline in sight. But in what does a speaker's reserve power consist? In a well-founded reliance on his general and particular grasp of his subject, in the quality of being alert and resourceful in thought, particularly in the ability to think while on his feet, and in that self-possession which makes one the captain of all his own forces, bodily and mental. The first of these elements, adequate preparation, and the last, self-reliance, were discussed fully in the chapters on self-confidence and fluency, so they will be touched only incidentally here. Besides, the next chapter will take up specific methods of preparation for public speaking. Therefore, the central theme of this chapter is the second of the elements of reserve power, thought. The mental storehouse. An empty mind, like an empty larder, may be a serious matter or not. All will depend on the available resources. If there is no food in the cupboard, the housewife does not nervously rattle the empty dishes. She telephones the grocer. If you have no ideas, do not rattle your empty ers and ahs, but get some ideas, and don't speak until you do get them. This, however, is not being what the old New England housekeeper used to call forehanded. The real solution of the problem of what to do with an empty head is never to let it become empty. In the artesian wells of Dakota, the water rushes to the surface and leaps a score of feet above the ground. The secret of this exuberant flow is, of course, the great supply below, crowding to get out. What is the use of stopping to prime a mental pump when you can fill your life with the resources for an artesian well? It is not enough to have merely enough. You must have more than enough. Then the pressure of your mass of thought and feeling will maintain your flow of speech and give you the confidence and poise that denote reserve power. To be away from home with only the exact return fare leaves a great deal to circumstances. Reserve power is magnetic. It does not consist in giving the idea that you are holding something in reserve, but rather in the suggestion that the audience is getting the cream of your observation, reading, experience, feeling, thought. To have reserve power, therefore, you must have enough milk of material on hand to supply sufficient cream. But how shall we get the milk? There are two ways. The one is first-hand, from the cow. The other is second-hand, from the milkman. The seeing eye. Some sage has said, "For 1,000 men who can speak, there is only one who can think. For 1,000 men who can think, there is only one who can see." To see and to think is to get your milk from your own cow. When the one man in a million who can see comes along, we call him master. Old Mr. Holbrook of Cranford asked his guest what color ash buds were in March. She confessed she did not know, to which the old gentleman answered, "I knew you didn't." "No more did I, an old fool that I am, till this young man comes and tells me. Black as ash buds in March, and I've lived all my life in the country. More shame for me not to know. Black, they are jet black, madam." This young man, referred to by Mr. Holbrook, was Tennyson. Henry Ward Beecher said, quote, "I do not believe that I have ever met a man on the street that I did not get from him some element for a sermon. I never see anything in nature which does not work towards that for which I give the strength of my life. The material for my sermons is all the time following me and swarming up around me." End quote. Instead of saying only one man in a million can see, it would strike nearer the truth to say that none of us sees with perfect understanding more than a fraction of what passes before our eyes. Yet this faculty of acute and accurate observation is so important that no man ambitious to lead can neglect it. The next time you are in a car, look at those who sit opposite you and see what you can discover of their habits, occupations, ideals, nationalities, environments, education, and so on. You may not see a great deal the first time, but practice will reveal astonishing results. Transmute every incident of your day into a subject for a speech or an illustration. Translate all that you see into terms of speech. When you can describe all that you have seen in definite words, you are seeing clearly. You are becoming the millionth man. De Maupassant's description of an author should also fit the public speaker. Quote, "His eye is like a suction pump, absorbing everything, like a pickpocket's hand, always at work. Nothing escapes him. He is constantly collecting material, gathering up glances, gestures, intentions, everything that goes on in his presence. The slightest look, the least act, the merest trifle." End quote. De Maupassant was himself a millionth man, a master. Ruskin took a common rock crystal and saw hidden within its stolid heart lessons which have not yet ceased to move men's lives. Beecher stood for hours before the window of a jewelry store, thinking out analogies between jewels and the souls of men. Gough saw in a single drop of water enough truth wherewith to quench the thirst of 5,000 souls. Thoreau sat so still in the shadowy woods that birds and insects came and opened up their secret lives to his eye. Emerson observed the soul of a man so long that at length he could say, "I cannot hear what you say, for seeing what you are. Prior for 3 years studied the life of his babe, and so became an authority upon the child mind. Observation: most men are blind. There are 1,000 times as many hidden truths and undiscovered facts about us today as have made discoverers famous, facts waiting for someone to pluck out the heart of their mystery. But so long as men go about the search with eyes that see not, so long will these hidden pearls lie in their shells. Not an orator, but who could more effectively point and feather his shafts were he to search nature rather than libraries? Too few can see sermons in stones and books in the running brooks, because they are so used to seeing merely sermons in books and only stones in running brooks. Sir Philip Sidney had a saying, "Look in thy heart and write." Massillon explained his astute knowledge of the human heart by saying, "I learned it by studying myself." Byron says of John Locke that all his knowledge of the human understanding was derived from studying his own mind. Since multiform nature is all about us, originality ought not to be so rare. How to Attract and Hold an Audience, J. Berg Eisenwein. The thinking mind. Thinking is doing mental arithmetic with facts. Add this fact to that, and you reach a certain conclusion. Subtract this truth from another, and you have a definite result. Multiply this fact by another, and have a precise product. See how many times this occurrence happens in that space of time, and you have reached a calculable dividend. In thought processes, you perform every known problem of arithmetic and algebra. That is why mathematics are such excellent mental gymnastics. But by the same token, thinking is work. Thinking takes energy. Thinking requires time and patience and broad information and clear-headedness. Beyond a miserable little surface scratching, few people really think at all. Only 1 in 1,000, according to the pundit already quoted. So long as the present system of education prevails, and children are taught through the ear rather than through the eye, so long as they are expected to remember thoughts of others rather than think for themselves, this proportion will continue. 1 man in 1,000,000 will be able to see, and 1 in 1,000 to think. But however thoughtless a mind has been, there is promise of better things so soon as the mind detects its own lack of thought power. The first step is to stop regarding thought as the magic of the mind, to use Byron's expression, and see it as thought truly is, a weighing of ideas and the placing of them in relationships to each other. Ponder this definition and see if you have learned to think efficiently. Habitual thinking is just that, a habit. Habit comes of doing a thing repeatedly. The lower habits are acquired easily. The higher ones require deeper grooves if they are to persist. So we find that the thought habit comes only with resolute practice. Yet no effort will yield richer dividends. Persist in practice, and whereas you have been able to think only an inch deep into a subject, you will soon find that you can penetrate it a foot. Perhaps this homely metaphor will suggest how to begin the practice of consecutive thinking, by which we mean welding a number of separate thought links into a chain that will hold. Take one link at a time, see that each naturally belongs with the ones you link to it, and remember that a single missing link means no chain. Thinking is the most fascinating and exhilarating of all mental exercises. Once realize that your opinion on a subject does not represent the choice you have made between what Dr. Cerebrum has written and Professor Cerebellum has said, but is the result of your own earnestly applied brain energy, and you will gain a confidence in your ability to speak on that subject that nothing will be able to shake. Your thought will have given you both power and reserve power. Someone has condensed the relation of thought to knowledge in these pungent, homely lines. Don't give me the man who thinks he thinks. Don't give me the man who thinks he knows. But give me the man who knows he thinks, and I have the man who knows he knows. Reading as a stimulus to thought. No matter how dry the cow, however, nor how poor our ability to milk, there is still the milkman. We can read what others have seen and felt and thought. Often, indeed, such records will kindle within us that pre-essential and vital spark, the desire to be a thinker. The following selection is taken from one of Dr. Newell Dwight Hillis's lectures, as given in A Man's Value to Society. Dr. Hillis is a most fluent speaker. He never refers to notes. He has reserve power. His mind is a veritable treasure house of facts and ideas. See how he draws from a knowledge of 15 different general or special subjects: geology, plant life, Palestine, chemistry, Eskimos, mythology, literature, the Nile, history, law, wit, evolution, religion, biography, and electricity. Surely it needs no sage to discover that the secret of this man's reserve power is the old secret of our artesian well, whose abundance surges from unseen depths. The uses of books and reading. Used by permission. Each Kingsley approaches a stone as a jeweler approaches a casket to unlock the hidden gems. Geikie causes the bit of hard coal to unroll the juicy bud, the thick odorous leaves, the pungent boughs, until the bit of carbon enlarges into the beauty of a tropic forest. That little book of Grant Allen's, called How Plants Grow, exhibits trees and shrubs as eating, drinking, and marrying. We see certain date groves in Palestine, and other date groves in the desert 100 miles away, and the pollen of the one carried upon the trade winds to the branches of the other. We see the tree with its strange system of waterworks, pumping the sap up through pipes and mains. We see the chemical laboratory in the branches, mixing flavor for the orange in one bough, mixing the juices of the pineapple in another. We behold the tree as a mother making each infant acorn ready against the long winter, rolling it in swaths soft and warm as wool blankets, wrapping it around with garments impervious to the rain, and finally slipping the infant acorn into a sleeping bag, like those the Eskimos gave Dr. Kane. At length we come to feel that the Greeks were not far wrong in thinking each tree had a dryad in it, animating it, protecting it against destruction, dying when the tree withered. Some Faraday shows us that each drop of water is a sheath for electrical forces sufficient to charge 800,000 Leyden jars, or drive an engine from Liverpool to London. Some Sir William Thomson tells us how hydrogen gas will chew up a large iron spike as a child's molars will chew off the end of a stick of candy. Thus each new book opens up some new and hitherto unexplored realm of nature. Thus books fulfill for us the legend of the wondrous glass that showed its owner all things distant and all things hidden. Through books our world becomes as a bud from the bower of God's beauty, the sun as a spark from the light of his wisdom, the sky as a bubble on the sea of his power. Therefore Mrs. Browning's words, "No child can be called fatherless who has God and his mother. No youth can be called friendless who has God and the companionship of good books." Books also advantage us in that they exhibit the unity of progress, the solidarity of the race, and the continuity of history. Authors lead us back along the pathway of law, of liberty or religion, and set us down in front of the great man in whose brain the principle had its rise. As the discoverer leads us from the mouth of the Nile back to the headwaters of Nyanza, so books exhibit great ideas and institutions, as they move forward, ever widening and deepening, like some Nile feeding many civilizations. For all the reforms of today go back to some reform of yesterday. Man's art goes back to Athens and Thebes. Man's laws go back to Blackstone and Justinian. Man's reapers and plows go back to the savage scratching the ground with his forked stick, drawn by the wild bullock. The heroes of liberty march forward in a solid column. Lincoln grasps the hand of Washington. Washington received his weapons at the hands of Hampden and Cromwell. The great Puritans lock hands with Luther and Savonarola. The unbroken procession brings us at length to him whose Sermon on the Mount was the very charter of liberty. It puts us under a divine spell to perceive that we are all co-workers with the great men, and yet single threads in the warp and woof of civilization. And when books have related us to our own age, and related all the epochs to God, whose providence is the Gulf Stream of history, these teachers go on to stimulate us to new and greater achievements. Alone, man is an unlighted candle. The mind needs some book to kindle its faculties. Before Byron began to write, he used to give half an hour to reading some favorite passage. The thought of some great writer never failed to kindle Byron into a creative glow, even as a match lights the kindlings upon the grate. In these burning, luminous moods, Byron's mind did its best work. The true book stimulates the mind, as no wine can ever quicken the blood. It is reading that brings us to our best, and rouses each faculty to its most vigorous life. We recognize this as pure cream, and if it seems at first to have its secondary source in the friendly milkman, let us not forget that the theme is the uses of books and reading. Dr. Hillis both sees and thinks. It is fashionable just now to decry the value of reading. We read, we are told, to avoid the necessity of thinking for ourselves. Books are for the mentally lazy. Though this is only a half-truth, the element of truth it contains is large enough to make us pause. Put yourself through a good old Presbyterian soul-searching self-examination, and if reading from thought laziness is one of your sins, confess it. No one can shrive you of it but yourself. Do penance for it by using your own brains, for it is a transgression that dwarfs the growth of thought and destroys mental freedom. At first the penance will be trying, but at the last you will be glad in it. Reading should entertain, give information, or stimulate thought. Here, however, we are chiefly concerned with information and stimulation of thought. What shall I read for information? The ample page of knowledge, as Gray tells us, is rich with the spoils of time, and these are ours for the price of a theater ticket. You may command Socrates and Marcus Aurelius to sit beside you and discourse of their choicest, hear Lincoln at Gettysburg and Pericles at Athens, storm the Bastille with Hugo, and wander through paradise with Dante. You may explore darkest Africa with Stanley, penetrate the human heart with Shakespeare, chat with Carlyle about heroes, and delve with the Apostle Paul into the mysteries of faith. The general knowledge and the inspiring ideas that men have collected through ages of toil and experiment are yours for the asking. The sage of Chelsea was right. The true university of these days is a collection of books. To master a worthwhile book is to master much else besides. Few of us, however, make perfect conquest of a volume without first owning it physically. To read a borrowed book may be a joy, but to assign your own book a place of its own on your own shelves, be they few or many, to love the book and feel of its worn cover, to thumb it over slowly, page by page, to pencil its margins in agreement or in protest, to smile or thrill with its remembered pungencies. No mere book borrower could ever sense all that delight. The reader who possesses books in this double sense finds also that his books possess him, and the volumes which most firmly grip his life are likely to be those it has cost him some sacrifice to own. These lightly come-by titles, which Mr. Fatpurse selects, perhaps by proxy, can scarcely play the guide, philosopher, and friend in crucial moments as do the books, long coveted, joyously attained, that are welcomed into the lives, and not merely the libraries, of us others who are at once poorer and richer. So it is scarcely too much to say that of all the many ways in which an owned, a mastered, book is like to a human friend, the truest ways are these. A friend is worth making sacrifices for, both to gain and to keep, and our loves go out most dearly to those into whose inmost lives we have sincerely entered. When you have not the advantage of the test of time by which to judge books, investigate as thoroughly as possible the authority of the books you read. Much that is printed and passes current is counterfeit. "I read it in a book," is to many a sufficient warranty of truth, but not to the thinker. What book? Asks the careful mind. Who wrote it? What does he know about the subject, and what right has he to speak on it? Who recognizes him as authority? With what other recognized authorities does he agree or disagree? Being caught trying to pass counterfeit money, even unintentionally, is an unpleasant situation. Beware lest you circulate spurious coin. Above all, seek reading that makes you use your own brains. Such reading must be alive with fresh points of view, packed with special knowledge, and deal with subjects of vital interest. Do not confine your reading to what you already know you will agree with. Opposition wakes one up. The other road may be the better, but you will never know it unless you give it the once-over. Do not do all your thinking and investigating in front of given QEDs, merely assembling reasons to fill in between your theorem and what you want to prove will get you nowhere. Approach each subject with an open mind and, once sure that you have thought it out thoroughly and honestly, have the courage to abide by the decision of your own thought, but don't brag about it afterward. No book on public speaking will enable you to discourse on the tariff if you know nothing about the tariff. Knowing more about it than the other man will be your only hope for making the other man listen to you. Take a group of men discussing a governmental policy of which someone says, "It is socialistic." That will commend the policy to Mr. A, who believes in socialism, but condemn it to Mr. B, who does not. It may be that neither had considered the policy beyond noticing that its surface color was socialistic. The chances are, furthermore, that neither Mr. A nor Mr. B has a definite idea of what socialism really is, for as Robert Louis Stevenson says, "Man lives not by bread alone, but chiefly by catchwords." If you are of this group of men, and have observed this proposed government policy, and investigated it, and thought about it, what you have to say cannot fail to command their respect and approval, for you will have shown them that you possess a grasp of your subject and, to adopt an exceedingly expressive bit of slang, then some. Questions and exercises. 1. Robert Houdin trained his son to give one swift glance at a shop window in passing and be able to report accurately a surprising number of its contents. Try this several times on different windows and report the result. 2. What effect does reserve power have on an audience? 3. What are the best methods for acquiring reserve power? 4. What is the danger of too much reading? 5. Analyze some speech that you have read or heard and notice how much real information there is in it. Compare it with Dr. Hillis's speech on Brave Little Belgium, page 394. 6. Write out a 3-minute speech on any subject you choose. How much information and what new ideas does it contain? Compare your speech with the extract on page 191 from Dr. Hillis's The Uses of Books and Reading. 7. Have you ever read a book on the practice of thinking? If so, give your impressions of its value. Note, there are a number of excellent books on the subject of thought and the management of thought. The following are recommended as being especially helpful. Thinking and Learning to Think, Nathan C. Schaefer. Talks to Students on the Art of Study, Kramer. As a Man Thinketh, Allen. 8. Define A. Logic, B. Mental philosophy or mental science, C. Psychology, D. Abstract. End of section 17. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Eisenwein. Section 18. Chapter 18. Subject and Preparation. Suit your topics to your strength, and ponder well your subject and its length, nor lift your load before you're quite aware what weight your shoulders will or will not bear. Byron, Hints from Horace. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is already a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Such is the salutation of the dawn. From the Sanskrit. In the chapter preceding, we have seen the influence of thought and reserve power on general preparedness for public speech. But preparation consists in something more definite than the cultivation of thought power, whether from original or from borrowed sources. It involves a specifically acquisitive attitude of the whole life. If you would become a full soul, you must constantly take in and assimilate, for in that way only may you hope to give out that which is worth the hearing. But do not confuse the acquisition of general information with the mastery of specific knowledge. Information consists of a fact or a group of facts. Knowledge is organized information. Knowledge knows a fact in relation to other facts. Now, the important thing here is that you should set all your faculties to take in the things about you with the particular object of correlating them and storing them for use in public speech. You must hear with the speaker's ear, see with the speaker's eye, and choose books and companions and sights and sounds with the speaker's purpose in view. At the same time, be ready to receive unplanned-for knowledge. One of the fascinating elements in your life as a public speaker will be the conscious growth in power that casual daily experiences bring. If your eyes are alert, you will be constantly discovering facts, illustrations, and ideas without having set out in search of them. These all may be turned to account on the platform. Even the leaden events of humdrum daily life may be melted into bullets for future battles. Conservation of time and preparation. But, you say, I have so little time for preparation. My mind must be absorbed by other matters. Daniel Webster never let an opportunity pass to gather material for his speeches. When he was a boy working in a sawmill, he read out of a book in one hand and busied himself at some mechanical task with the other. In youth, Patrick Henry roamed the fields and woods in solitude for days at a time, unconsciously gathering material and impressions for his later service as a speaker. Dr. Russell H. Conwell, the man who, the late Charles A. Dana said, had addressed more hearers than any living man, used to memorize long passages from Milton while tending the boiling syrup pans in the silent New England woods at night. The modern employer would discharge a Webster of today for inattention to duty, and doubtless he would be justified. And Patrick Henry seemed only an idle chap even in those easy-going days. But the truth remains. Those who take in power and have the purpose to use it efficiently will someday win to the place in which that stored-up power will revolve great wheels of influence. Napoleon said that quarter hours decide the destinies of nations. How many quarter hours do we let drift by aimlessly? Robert Louis Stevenson conserved all his time. Every experience became capital for his work, for capital may be defined as the results of labor stored up to assist future production. He continually tried to put into suitable language the scenes and actions that were in evidence about him. Emerson says, quote, "Tomorrow will be like today. Life wastes itself whilst we are preparing to live." End quote. Why wait for a more convenient season for this broad, general preparation? The 15 minutes that we spend on the car could be profitably turned into speech capital. Procure a cheap edition of modern speeches, and by cutting out a few pages each day and reading them during the idle minute here and there, note how soon you can make yourself familiar with the world's best speeches. If you do not wish to mutilate your book, take it with you. Most of the epoch-making books are now printed in small volumes. The daily waste of natural gas in the Oklahoma fields is equal to 10,000 tons of coal. Only about 3% of the power of the coal that enters the furnace ever diffuses itself from your electric bulb as light. The other 97% is wasted. Yet these wastes are no larger nor more to be lamented than the tremendous waste of time which, if conserved, would increase the speaker's powers to their nth degree. Scientists are making 3 ears of corn grow where 1 grew before. Efficiency engineers are eliminating useless motions and products from our factories. Catch the spirit of the age and apply efficiency to the use of the most valuable asset you possess, time. What do you do mentally with the time you spend in dressing or in shaving? Take some subject and concentrate your energies on it for a week by utilizing just the spare moments that would otherwise be wasted. You will be amazed at the result. 1 passage a day from the Book of Books, 1 golden ingot from some mastermind, 1 fully possessed thought of your own might thus be added to the treasury of your life. Do not waste your time in ways that profit you nothing. Fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, and on the platform you will be immeasurably the gainer. Let no word of this, however, seem to decry the value of recreation. Nothing is more vital to a worker than rest, yet nothing is so vitiating to the shirker. Be sure that your recreation recreates. A pause in the midst of labors gathers strength for new effort. The mistake is to pause too long, or to fill your pauses with ideas that make life flabby. Choosing a subject. Subject and materials tremendously influence each other. This arises from the fact that there are 2 distinct ways in which a subject may be chosen, by arbitrary choice or by development from thought and reading. Arbitrary choice of one subject from among a number involves so many important considerations that no speaker ever fails to appreciate the tone of satisfaction in him who triumphantly announces, "I have a subject." Do give me a subject. How often the weary school teachers hear that cry. Then a list of themes is suggested, gone over, considered, and, in most instances, rejected, because the teacher can know but imperfectly what is in the pupil's mind. To suggest a subject in this way is like trying to discover the street on which a lost child lives, by naming over a number of streets until one strikes the little one's ear as sounding familiar. Choice by development is a very different process. It does not ask, "What shall I say?" It turns the mind in upon itself and asks, "What do I think?" Thus, the subject may be said to choose itself, for in the process of thought or of reading, one theme rises into prominence and becomes a living germ, soon to grow into the discourse. He who has not learned to reflect is not really acquainted with his own thoughts. Hence, his thoughts are not productive. Habits of reading and reflection will supply the speaker's mind with an abundance of subjects of which he already knows something from the very reading and reflection which gave birth to his theme. This is not a paradox, but sober truth. It must be already apparent that the choice of a subject by development savors more of a collection than of conscious selection. The subject pops into the mind. In the intellect of the trained thinker it concentrates, by a process which we have seen to be induction, the facts and truths of which he has been reading and thinking. This is most often a gradual process. The scattered ideas may be but vaguely connected at first, but more and more they concentrate and take on a single form until at length one strong idea seems to grasp the soul with irresistible force and to cry aloud, "Arise, I am your theme. Henceforth, until you transmute me by the alchemy of your inward fire into vital speech, you shall know no rest. Happy then is that speaker, for he has found a subject that grips him. Of course, experienced speakers use both methods of selection. Even a reading and reflective man is sometimes compelled to hunt for a theme from Dan to Beersheba, and then the task of gathering materials becomes a serious one. But even in such a case, there is a sense in which the selection comes by development, because no careful speaker settles upon a theme which does not represent at least some matured thought. How to Attract and Hold an Audience, J. Berg Eisenwein. Deciding on the subject matter. Even when your theme has been chosen for you by someone else, there remains to you a considerable field for choice of subject matter. The same considerations, in fact, that would govern you in choosing a theme must guide in the selection of the material. Ask yourself, or someone else, such questions as these. What is the precise nature of the occasion? How large an audience may be expected? From what walks of life do they come? What is their probable attitude toward the theme? Who else will speak? Do I speak first, last, or where on the program? What are the other speakers going to talk about? What is the nature of the auditorium? Is there a desk? Could the subject be more effectively handled if somewhat modified? Precisely how much time am I to fill? It is evident that many speech misfits of subject, speaker, occasion, and place are due to failure to ask just such pertinent questions. What should be said, by whom, and in what circumstances, constitute 90% of efficiency in public address. No matter who asks you, refuse to be a square peg in a round hole. Questions of proportion. Proportion in a speech is attained by a nice adjustment of time. How fully you may treat your subject it is not always for you to say. Let 10 minutes mean neither 9 nor 11, though better 9 than 11 at all events. You wouldn't steal a man's watch, no more should you steal the time of the succeeding speaker, or that of the audience. There is no need to overstep time limits if you make your preparation adequate and divide your subject so as to give each thought its due proportion of attention, and no more. Blessed is the man that maketh short speeches, for he shall be invited to speak again. Another matter of prime importance is, what part of your address demands the most emphasis? This once decided, you will know where to place that pivotal section so as to give it the greatest strategic value, and what degree of preparation must be given to that central thought so that the vital part may not be submerged by non-essentials. Many a speaker has awakened to find that he has burnt up 8 minutes of a 10-minute speech in merely getting up steam. That is like spending 80% of your building money on the vestibule of the house. The same sense of proportion must tell you to stop precisely when you are through, and it is to be hoped that you will discover the arrival of that period before your audience does. Tapping original sources. The surest way to give life to speech material is to gather your facts at first hand. Your words come with the weight of authority when you can say, I have examined the employment rolls of every mill in this district and find that 32% of the children employed are under the legal age. No citation of authorities can equal that. You must adopt the methods of the reporter and find out the facts underlying your argument or appeal. To do so may prove laborious, but it should not be irksome, for the great world of fact teems with interest, and over and above all is the sense of power that will come to you from original investigation. To see and feel the facts you are discussing will react upon you much more powerfully than if you were to secure the facts at second hand. Live an active life among people who are doing worthwhile things. Keep eyes and ears and mind and heart open to absorb truth, and then tell of the things you know, as if you know them. The world will listen, for the world loves nothing so much as real life. How to use a library. Unsuspected treasures lie in the smallest library. Even when the owner has read every last page of his books, it is only in rare instances that he has full indexes to all of them, either in his mind or on paper, so as to make available the vast number of varied subjects touched upon or treated in volumes whose titles would never suggest such topics. For this reason, it is a good thing to take an odd hour now and then to browse. Take down one volume after another and look over its table of contents and its index. It is a reproach to any author of a serious book not to have provided a full index with cross-references. Then glance over the pages, making notes, mental or physical, of material that looks interesting and usable. Most libraries contain volumes that the owner is going to read someday. A familiarity with even the contents of such books on your own shelves will enable you to refer to them when you want help. Writings read long ago should be treated in the same way. In every chapter some surprise lurks to delight you. In looking up a subject, do not be discouraged if you do not find it indexed or outlined in the table of contents. You are pretty sure to discover some material under a related title. Suppose you set to work somewhat in this way to gather references on thinking. First, you look over your book titles, and there is Schaeffer's Thinking and Learning to Think. Near it is Kramer's Talks to Students on the Art of Study. That seems likely to provide some material, and it does. Naturally, you think next of your book on psychology, and there is help there. If you have a volume on the human intellect, you will have already turned to it. Suddenly you remember your encyclopedia and your dictionary of quotations, and now material fairly rains upon you. The problem is what not to use. In the encyclopedia, you turn to every reference that includes or touches or even suggests thinking, and in the dictionary of quotations you do the same. The latter volume you find peculiarly helpful because it suggests several volumes to you that are on your own shelves. You never would have thought to look in them for references on this subject. Even fiction will supply help, but especially books of essays and biography. Be aware of your own resources. To make a general index to your library does away with the necessity for indexing individual volumes that are not already indexed. To begin with, keep a notebook by you, or small cards and paper cuttings in your pocket and on your desk will serve as well. The same notebook that records the impressions of your own experiences and thoughts will be enriched by the ideas of others. To be sure, this notebook habit means labor, but remember that more speeches have been spoiled by half-hearted preparation than by lack of talent. Laziness is an own brother to overconfidence, and both are your inveterate enemies, though they pretend to be soothing friends. Conserve your material by indexing every good idea on cards thus. Socialism. Progress of Socialism, envelope 16. Socialism, a Fallacy, 96/210. General Article on Socialism, Howells, December 1913. Socialism and the Franchise, Forbes. Socialism in Ancient Life, original manuscript. Envelope 102. On the card illustrated above, clippings are indexed by giving the number of the envelope in which they are filed. The envelopes may be of any size desired and kept in any convenient receptacle. On the foregoing example, Progress of Socialism, envelope 16, will represent a clipping filed in envelope 16, which is, of course, numbered arbitrarily. The fractions refer to books in your library, the numerator being the book number, the denominator referring to the page. Thus, Socialism, a Fallacy, 96/210, refers to page 210 of volume 96 in your library. By some arbitrary sign, say red ink, you may even index a reference in a public library book. If you preserve your magazine, important articles may be indexed by month and year. An entire volume on a subject may be indicated like the imaginary book by Forbes. If you clip the articles, it is better to index them according to the envelope system. Your own writings and notes may be filed in envelopes with the clippings or in a separate series. Another good indexing system combines the library index with the scrap or clipping system by making the outside of the envelope serve the same purpose as the card for the indexing of books, magazines, clippings, and manuscripts. the latter two classes of material being enclosed in the envelopes that index them, and all filed alphabetically. When your cards accumulate so as to make ready reference difficult under a single alphabet, you may subdivide each letter by subordinate guide cards marked by the vowels A, E, I, O, U. Thus, antiquities would be filed under I in A because A begins the word and the second letter N comes after the vowel I in the alphabet, but before O. In the same manner, Beecher would be filed under E in B, and hydrogen would come under U in H. Outlining the address. No one can advise you how to prepare the notes for an address. Some speakers get the best results while walking out and ruminating, jotting down notes as they pause in their walk. Others never put pen to paper until the whole speech has been thought out. The great majority, however, will take notes, classify their notes, write a hasty first draft, and then revise the speech. Try each of these methods and choose the one that is best for you. Do not allow any man to force you to work in his way, but do not neglect to consider his way, for it may be better than your own. For those who make notes and with their aid write out the speech, these suggestions may prove helpful. After having read and thought enough, classify your notes by setting down the big, central thoughts of your material on separate cards or slips of paper. These will stand in the same relation to your subject as chapters do to a book. Then arrange these main ideas or heads in such an order that they will lead effectively to the result you have in mind, so that the speech may rise in argument, in interest, in power, by piling one fact or appeal upon another until the climax, the highest point of influence on your audience, has been reached. Next, group all your ideas, facts, anecdotes, and illustrations under the foregoing main heads, each where it naturally belongs. You now have a skeleton or outline of your address that in its polished form might serve either as the brief or manuscript notes for the speech or as the guide outline which you will expand into the written address, if written it is to be. Imagine each of the main ideas in the brief on page 213 as being separate. Then picture your mind as sorting them out and placing them in order. Finally, conceive of how you would fill in the facts and examples under each head, giving special prominence to those you wish to emphasize and subduing those of less moment. In the end, you have the outline complete. The simplest form of outline, not very suitable for use on the platform, however, is the following. Why prosperity is coming. What prosperity means. The real tests of prosperity. Its basis in the soil. American agricultural progress. New interest in farming. Enormous value of our agricultural products. Reciprocal effect on trade. Foreign countries affected. Effects of our new internal economy. The regulation of banking and big business on prosperity. Effects of our revised attitude toward foreign markets, including our merchant marine. Summary. Obviously, this very simple outline is capable of considerable expansion under each head by the addition of facts, arguments, inferences, and examples. Here is an outline arranged with more regard for argument. Foreign immigration should be restricted. Adapted from Competition Rhetoric, Scott and Denny, page 241. 1. Fact as cause. Many immigrants are practically paupers. Proofs involving statistics or statements of authorities. 2. Fact as effect. They sooner or later fill our almshouses and become public charges. Proofs involving statistics or statements of authorities. 3. Fact as cause. Some of them are criminals. Examples of recent cases. 4. Fact as effect. They reinforce the criminal classes. Effects on our civic life. 5. Fact as cause. Many of them know nothing of the duties of free citizenship. Examples. 6. Fact as effect. Such immigrants recruit the worst element in our politics. Proofs. A more highly ordered grouping of topics and subtopics is shown in the following. Ours a Christian Nation. 1. Introduction. Why the subject is timely. Influences operative against this contention today. 2. Christianity presided over the early history of America. 1. First practical discovery by a Christian explorer. Columbus worshipped God on the new soil. 2. The Cavaliers. 3. The French Catholic settlers. 4. The Huguenots. 5. The Puritans. 3. The birth of our nation was under Christian auspices. 1. Christian character of Washington. 2. Other Christian patriots. 3. The Church in our revolutionary struggle. Muhlenberg. 4. Our later history has only emphasized our national attitude. Examples of dealings with foreign nations show Christian magnanimity. Returning the Chinese indemnity, fostering the Red Cross, attitude toward Belgium. 5. Our governmental forms and many of our laws are of Christian temper. 1. The use of the Bible in public ways, oaths, etc. 2. The Bible in our schools. 3. Christian chaplains minister to our lawmaking bodies, to our Army, and to our Navy. 4. The Christian Sabbath is officially and generally recognized. 5. The Christian family and the Christian system of morality are at the basis of our laws. 6. The life of the people testifies of the power of Christianity. Charities, education, etc. have Christian tone. 7. Other nations regard us as a Christian people. 8. Conclusion. The attitude which may reasonably be expected of all good citizens toward questions touching the preservation of our standing as a Christian nation. Writing and revision. After the outline has been perfected comes the time to write the speech, if write it you must. Then, whatever you do, write it at white heat, with not too much thought of anything but the strong, appealing expression of your ideas. The final stage is the paring down, the revision, the seeing again, as the word implies, when all the parts of the speech must be impartially scrutinized for clearness, precision, force, effectiveness, suitability, proportion, logical climax. And in all this you must imagine yourself to be before your audience, for a speech is not an essay, and what will convince and arouse in the one will not prevail in the other. The title. Often last of all will come that which in a sense is first of all, the title, the name by which the speech is known. Sometimes it will be the simple theme of the address, as The New Americanism by Henry Watterson, or it may be a bit of symbolism typifying the spirit of the address, as Acres of Diamonds by Russell H. Conwell, or it may be a fine phrase taken from the body of the address, as Pass Prosperity Around by Albert J. Beveridge. All in all, from whatever motive it be chosen, let the title be fresh, short, suited to the subject, and likely to excite interest. Questions and exercises. 1. Define A. Introduction, B. Climax, C. Peroration. 2. If a 30-minute speech would require 3 hours for specific preparation, would you expect to be able to do equal justice to a speech 1/3 as long in 1/3 the time for preparation? Give reasons. 3. Relate briefly any personal experience you may have had in conserving time for reading and thought. 4. In the manner of a reporter or investigator, go out and get first-hand information on some subject of interest to the public. Arrange the results of your research in the form of an outline or a brief. 5. From a private or a public library, gather enough authoritative material on one of the following questions to build an outline for a 20-minute address. Take one definite side of the question. A. The housing of the poor. B. The commission form of government for cities as a remedy for political graft. C. the test of women's suffrage in the West. D. Present trends of public taste in reading. E. Municipal art. F. Is the theater becoming more elevated in tone? G. The effects of the magazine on literature. H. Does modern life destroy ideals? I. Is competition the life of trade? J. Baseball is too absorbing to be a wholesome national game. K. Summer baseball and amateur standing. L. Does college training unfit a woman for domestic life? M. Does women's competition with man in business dull the spirit of chivalry? N. Are elective studies suited to high school courses? O. Does the modern college prepare men for preeminent leadership? P. The YMCA in its relation to the labor problem. Q. Public speaking as training in citizenship. 6. Construct the outline, examining it carefully for interest, convincing character, proportion, and climax of arrangement. Note, this exercise should be repeated until the student shows facility in synthetic arrangement. 7. Deliver the address, if possible, before an audience. 8. Make a 300-word report on the results as best you are able to estimate them. 9. Tell something of the benefits of using a periodical or cumulative index. 10. Give a number of quotations suitable for a speaker's use that you have memorized in off moments. 11. In the manner of the outline on page 213, analyze the address on pages 78 and 79, the history of liberty. 12. Give an outline analysis from notes or memory of an address or sermon to which you have listened for this purpose. 13. Criticize the address from a structural point of view. 14. Invent titles for any 5 of the themes in Exercise 5. 15. Criticize the titles of any 5 chapters of this book, suggesting better ones. 16. Criticize the title of any lecture or address of which you know. End of section 18.
The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Burke Eisenwein. Section 19. Influencing by Exposition. Speak not at all, in any wise, till you have somewhat to speak. Care not for the reward of your speaking, but simply and with undivided mind for the truth of your speaking. Thomas Carlyle, Essay on Biography. A complete discussion of the rhetorical structure of public speeches requires a fuller treatise than can be undertaken in a work of this nature. Yet in this chapter and in the succeeding ones on description, narration, argument, and pleading, the underlying principles are given and explained as fully as need be for a working knowledge, and adequate book references are given for those who would perfect themselves in rhetorical art. The nature of exposition. In the word expose, to lay bare, to uncover, to show the true inwardness of, we see the foundation idea of exposition. It is the clear and precise setting forth of what the subject really is. It is explanation. Exposition does not draw a picture, for that would be description. To tell in exact terms what the automobile is, to name its characteristic parts and explain their workings, would be exposition. So would an explanation of the nature of fear. But to create a mental image of a particular automobile, with its glistening body, graceful lines, and great speed, would be description, and so would a picturing of fear acting on the emotions of a child at night. Exposition and description often intermingle and overlap, but fundamentally they are distinct. Their differences will be touched upon again in the chapter on description. Exposition, furthermore, does not include an account of how events happened. That is narration. When Peary lectured on his polar discoveries, he explained the instrument used for determining latitude and longitude. That was exposition. In picturing his equipment, he used description. In telling of his adventures day by day, he employed narration. In supporting some of his contentions, he used argument. Yet he mingled all these forms throughout the lecture. Neither does exposition deal with reasons and inferences. That is the field of argument. A series of connected statements intended to convince a prospective buyer that one automobile is better than another, or proofs that the appeal to fear is a wrong method of discipline, would not be exposition. The plain facts as set forth in expository speaking or writing are nearly always the basis of argument, yet the processes are not one. True, the statement of a single significant fact without the addition of another word may be convincing, but a moment's thought will show that the inference, which completes a chain of reasoning, is made in the mind of the hearer and presupposes other facts held in consideration. In like manner, it is obvious that the field of persuasion is not open to exposition, for exposition is entirely an intellectual process, with no emotional element. The importance of exposition. The importance of exposition in public speech is precisely the importance of setting forth a matter so plainly that it cannot be misunderstood. To master the process of exposition is to become a clear thinker. "I know when you do not ask me," replied a gentleman upon being requested to define a highly complex idea. Now, some large concepts defy explicit definition, but no mind should take refuge behind such exceptions, for where definition fails, other forms succeed. Sometimes we feel confident that we have perfect mastery of an idea, but when the time comes to express it, the clearness becomes a haze. Exposition, then, is the test of clear understanding. To speak effectively, you must be able to see your subject clearly and comprehensively, and to make your audience see it as you do. There are pitfalls on both sides of this path. To explain too little will leave your audience in doubt as to what you mean. It is useless to argue a question if it is not perfectly clear just what is meant by the question. Have you never come to a blind lane in conversation by finding that you were talking of one aspect of a matter while your friend was thinking of another? If two do not agree in the definitions of a musician, it is useless to dispute over a certain man's right to claim the title. On the other side of the path lies the abyss of tediously explaining too much. That offends because it impresses the hearers that you either do not respect their intelligence or are trying to blow a breeze into a tornado. Carefully estimate the probable knowledge of your audience, both in general and of the particular point you are explaining. In trying to simplify, it is fatal to sillify. To explain more than is needed for the purposes of your argument or appeal is to waste energy all around. In your efforts to be explicit, do not press exposition to the extent of dullness. The confines are not far distant, and you may arrive before you know it. Some purposes of exposition. From what has been said, it ought to be clear that, primarily, exposition weaves a cord of understanding between you and your audience. It lays, furthermore, a foundation of fact on which to build later statements, arguments, and appeals. In scientific and purely information speeches, exposition may exist by itself and for itself, as in a lecture on biology or on psychology. But in the vast majority of cases, it is used to accompany and prepare the way for the other forms of discourse. clearness, precision, accuracy, unity, truth, and necessity. These must be the constant standards by which you test the efficiency of your expositions, and, indeed, that of every explanatory statement. This dictum should be written on your brain in letters most plain, and let this apply not alone to the purposes of exposition, but in equal measure to your use of the methods of exposition. The various ways along which a speaker may proceed in exposition are likely to touch each other now and then, and even when they do not meet and actually overlap, they run so nearly parallel that the roads are sometimes distinct rather in theory than in any more practical respect. Definition, the primary expository method, is a statement of precise limits. Obviously, here the greatest care must be exercised that the terms of definition should not themselves demand too much definition, that the language should be concise and clear, and that the definition should neither exclude nor include too much. The following is a simple example. To expound is to set forth the nature, the significance, the characteristics, and the bearing of an idea or a group of ideas. Arlo Bates, Talks on Writing English. Contrast and antithesis are often used effectively to amplify definition, as in this sentence, which immediately follows the above-cited definition. Exposition therefore differs from description in that it deals directly with the meaning or intent of its subject, instead of with its appearance. This antithesis forms an expansion of the definition, and as such it might have been still further extended. In fact, this is a frequent practice in public speech, where the minds of the hearers often ask for reiteration and expanded statement to help them grasp a subject in its several aspects. This is the very heart of exposition, to amplify and clarify all the terms by which a matter is defined. Example is another method of amplifying a definition or of expounding an idea more fully. The following sentences immediately succeed Mr. Bates' definition and contrast just quoted. A good deal which we are accustomed inexactly to call description is really exposition. Suppose that your small boy wishes to know how an engine works and should say, "Please describe the steam engine to me." If you insist on taking his words literally, and are willing to run the risk of his indignation at being willfully misunderstood, you will to the best of your ability picture to him this familiarly wonderful machine. If you explain it to him, you are not describing, but expounding it. The chief value of example is that it makes clear the unknown by referring the mind to the known. Readiness of mind to make illuminating, apt comparisons for the sake of clearness is one of the speaker's chief resources on the platform. It is the greatest of all teaching gifts. It is a gift, moreover, that responds to cultivation. Read the 3 extracts from Arlo Bates as their author delivered them as one passage, and see how they melt into one, each part supplementing the other most helpfully. Analogy, which calls attention to similar relationships in objects not otherwise similar, is one of the most useful methods of exposition. The following striking specimen is from Beecher's Liverpool speech. A savage is a man of one story, and that one story a cellar. When a man begins to be civilized, he raises another story. When you Christianize and civilize the man, you put story upon story, for you develop faculty after faculty, and you have to supply every story with your productions. Discarding is a less common form of platform explanation. It consists in clearing away associated ideas so that the attention may be centered on the main thought to be discussed. Really, it is a negative factor in exposition, though a most important one, for it is fundamental to the consideration of an intricately related matter that subordinate and side questions should be set aside in order to bring out the main issue. Here is an example of the method. I cannot allow myself to be led aside from the only issue before this jury. It is not pertinent to consider that this prisoner is the husband of a heartbroken woman, and that his babes will go through the world under the shadow of the law's extremest penalty worked upon their father. We must forget the venerable father and the mother whom heaven in pity took before she learned of her son's disgrace. What have these matters of heart? What have the blenched faces of his friends? What have the prisoner's long and honorable career to say before this bar, when you are sworn to weigh only the direct evidence before you? The one and only question for you to decide on the evidence is whether this man did with revengeful intent commit the murder that every impartial witness has solemnly laid at his door. Classification assigns a subject to its class. By an allowable extension of the definition, it may be said to assign it also under its order, genus, and species. Classification is useful in public speech in narrowing the issue to a desired phase. It is equally valuable for showing a thing in its relation to other things, or in correlation. Classification is closely akin to definition and division. This question of the liquor traffic, sirs, takes its place beside the grave moral issue of all times. Whatever be its economic significance, and who is there to question it, whatever vital bearing it has upon our political system, and is there one who will deny it, the question of the licensed saloon must quickly be settled as the world in its advancement has settled the questions of constitutional government for the masses, of the opium traffic, of the serf, and of the slave, not as matters of economic and political expediency, but as questions of right and wrong. Analysis separates a subject into its essential parts. This it may do by various principles. For example, analysis may follow the order of time, geologic eras, order of place, geographic facts, logical order, a sermon outline, order of increasing interest, or procession to a climax, a lecture on 20th century poets, and so on. A classic example of analytical exposition is the following. In philosophy, the contemplations of men do either penetrate unto God, or are circumferred to nature, or are reflected or reverted upon himself. Out of which several inquiries there do arise three knowledges: divine philosophy, natural philosophy, and human philosophy, or humanity. For all things are marked and stamped with this triple character, or the power of God, the difference of nature, and the use of man. Lord Bacon, The Advancement of Learning. Division differs only from analysis in that analysis follows the inherent divisions of a subject, as illustrated in the foregoing passage, while division arbitrarily separates the subject for convenience of treatment, as in the following non-too-logical example. For civil history it is of three kinds, not unfitly to be compared with the three kinds of pictures or images. For of pictures or images we see some are unfinished, some are perfect, and some are defaced. So of histories we may find three kinds: memorials, perfect histories, and antiquities. For memorials are history unfinished, or the first or rough drafts of history, and antiquities are history defaced, or some remnants of history which have casually escaped the shipwreck of time. Lord Bacon, The Advancement of Learning. Generalization states a broad principle or a general truth, derived from examination of a considerable number of individual facts. This synthetic exposition is not the same as argumentative generalization, which supports a general contention by citing instances in proof. Observe how Holmes begins with one fact, and by adding another and another, reaches a complete whole. This is one of the most effective devices in the public speaker's repertory. Take a hollow cylinder, the bottom closed while the top remains open, and pour in water to the height of a few inches. Next, cover the water with a flat plate or piston, which fits the interior of the cylinder perfectly. Then apply heat to the water, and we shall witness the following phenomena. After the lapse of some minutes, the water will begin to boil, and the steam accumulating at the upper surface will make room for itself by raising the piston slightly. As the boiling continues, more and more steam will be formed, and raise the piston higher and higher, till all the water is boiled away, and nothing but steam is left in the cylinder. Now this machine, consisting of cylinder, piston, water, and fire, is the steam engine in its most elementary form. For a steam engine may be defined as an apparatus for doing work by means of heat applied to water, and since raising such a weight as the piston is a form of doing work, this apparatus, clumsy and inconvenient though it may be, answers the definition precisely. Reference to experience is one of the most vital principles in exposition, as in every other form of discourse. Reference to experience, as here used, means reference to the known. The known is that which the listener has seen, heard, read, felt, believed, or done, and which still exists in his consciousness, his stock of knowledge. It embraces all those thoughts, feelings, and happenings which are to him real. Reference to experience, then, means coming into the listener's life. The vast results obtained by science are won by no mystical faculties, by no mental processes other than those which are practiced by every one of us in the humblest and meanest affairs of life. A detective policeman discovers a burglar from the marks made by his shoe, by a mental process identical with that by which Cuvier restored the extinct animals of Montmartre from fragments of their bones. Nor does that process of induction and deduction by which a lady, finding a stain of a particular kind upon her dress, concludes that somebody has upset the inkstand thereon, differ in any way from that by which Adams and Leverrier discovered a new planet. The man of science, in fact, simply uses with scrupulous exactness the methods which we all habitually and at every moment use carelessly. Thomas Henry Huxley, Lay Sermons. Do you set down your name in the scroll of youth, that are written down old with all the characters of age? Have you not a moist eye, a dry hand, a yellow cheek, a white beard, a decreasing leg, an increasing belly? Is not your voice broken, your wind short, your chin double, your wit single, and every part about you blasted with antiquity? And will you yet call yourself young? Fie, 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 Sir John! Shakespeare, The Merry Wives of Windsor. Finally, in preparing expository material, ask yourself these questions regarding your subject. What is it, and what is it not? What is it like and unlike? What are its causes and effects? How shall it be divided? With what subjects is it correlated? What experiences does it recall? What examples illustrate it? Questions and exercises. 1. What would be the effect of adhering to any one of the forms of discourse in a public address? 2. Have you ever heard such an address? 3. Invent a series of examples illustrative of the distinctions made on pages 232 and 233. 4. Make a list of 10 subjects that might be treated largely, if not entirely, by exposition. 5. Name the 6 standards by which expository writing should be tried. 6. Define any one of the following: A. Storage battery. B. A free hand. C. Sailboat. D. The big stick. E. Nonsense. F. A good sport. G. Short story. H. Novel. I. Newspaper. J. Politician. K. Jealousy. L. Truth. M. Matinee girl. N. College honors system. O. Modish. P. Slum. Q. Settlement work. R. Forensic. 7. Amplify the definition by antithesis. 8. Invent 2 examples to illustrate the definition of question 6. 9. Invent 2 analogies for the same subject of question 6. 10. Make a short speech based on one of the following: A. Wages and salary. B. Master and man. C. War and peace. D. Home and the boarding house. E. Struggle and victory. F. Ignorance and ambition. 11. Make a 10-minute speech on any of the topics named in question 6, using all the methods of exposition already named. 12. Explain what is meant by discarding topics collateral and subordinate to a subject. 13. Rewrite the jury speech on page 224. 14. Define correlation. 15. Write an example of classification on any political, social, economic, or moral issue of the day. 16. Make a brief analytical statement of Henry W. Grady's The Race Problem. 17. By which analytical principle did you proceed? 18. Write a short, carefully generalized speech from a large amount of data on one of the following subjects: A. The servant girl problem. B. Cats. C. The baseball craze. D. Reform administrations. E. Suing societies. F. Coeducation. G. The traveling salesman. 19. Observe this passage from Newton's Effective Speaking. That man is a cynic. He sees goodness nowhere. He sneers at virtue, sneers at love. To him the maiden plighting her troth is an artful schemer, and he sees even in the mother's kiss nothing but an empty conventionality. Write, commit, and deliver 2 similar passages based on your choice from this list. A. The egotist. B. The sensualist. C. The hypocrite. D. The timid man. E. The joker. F. The flirt. G. The ungrateful woman. H. The mournful man. In both cases, use the principle of reference to experience. 20. Write a passage on any of the foregoing characters in imitation of the style of Shakespeare's characterization of Sir John Falstaff, page 227. End of section 19. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Eisenwein. Chapter 20. Influencing by Description. The groves of Eden, vanished now so long, live in description and look green in song. Alexander Pope, Windsor Forest. The moment our discourse rises above the ground line of familiar facts and is inflamed with passion or exalted thought, it clothes itself in images. A man conversing in earnest, if he watch his intellectual processes, will find that always a material image, more or less luminous, arises in his mind, contemporaneous with every thought, which furnishes the vestment of the thought. This imagery is spontaneous. It is the blending of experience with the present action of the mind. It is proper creation. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Nature. Like other valuable resources in public speaking, description loses its power when carried to an extreme. Over-ornamentation makes the subject ridiculous. A dust cloth is a very useful thing, but why embroider it? Whether description shall be restrained within its proper and important limits, or be encouraged to run riot, is the personal choice that comes before every speaker, for man's earliest literary tendency is to depict. The nature of description. To describe is to call up a picture in the mind of the hearer. In talking of description, we naturally speak of portraying, delineating, coloring, and all the devices of the picture painter. To describe is to visualize, hence we must look at description as a pictorial process, whether the writer deals with material or with spiritual objects. If you were asked to describe the rapid-fire gun, you might go about it in either of two ways. Give a cold, technical account of its mechanism, in whole and in detail, or else describe it as a terrible engine of slaughter, dwelling upon its effects rather than upon its structure. The former of these processes is exposition, the latter is true description. Exposition deals more with the general, while description must deal with the particular. Exposition elucidates ideas, description treats of things. Exposition deals with the abstract, description with the concrete. Exposition is concerned with the internal, description with the external. Exposition is enumerative, description literary. Exposition is intellectual, description sensory. Exposition is impersonal, description personal. If description is a visualizing process for the hearer, it is first of all such for the speaker. He cannot describe what he has never seen, either physically or in fancy. It is this personal quality, this question of the personal eye which sees the things later to be described, that makes description so interesting in public speak. Given a speaker of personality, and we are interested in his personal view, his view adds to the natural interest of the scene, and may even be the sole source of that interest to his auditors. The seeing eye has been praised in an earlier chapter on subject and preparation, and the imagination will be treated in a subsequent one on riding the winged horse. But here we must consider the picturing mind, the mind that forms the double habit of seeing things clearly, for we see more with the mind than we do with the physical eye, and then of reimagining these things for the purpose of getting them before the mind's eyes of the hearers. No habit is more useful than that of visualizing clearly the object, the scene, the situation, the action, the person about to be described. Unless that primary process is carried out clearly, the picture will be blurred for the hearer-beholder. In a work of this nature, we are concerned with the rhetorical analysis of description, and with its methods, only so far as may be needed for the practical purposes of the speaker. The following grouping, therefore, will not be regarded as complete, nor will it here be necessary to add more than a word of explanation. Description for public speakers. Objects, still and in motion. Scenes, still and including action. Situations, preceding change, during change, and after change. Actions, mental and physical. Persons, internal and external. Some of the foregoing processes will overlap in certain instances, and all are more likely to be found in combination than singly. When description is intended solely to give accurate information, as to delineate the appearance, not the technical construction of the latest Zeppelin airship, it is called scientific description and is akin to exposition. When it is intended to present a free picture for the purpose of making a vivid impression, it is called artistic description. With both of these, the public speaker has to deal, but more frequently with the latter form. Rhetoricians make still further distinctions. Methods of description. In public speaking, description should be mainly by suggestion, not only because suggestive description is so much more compact and time-saving, but because it is so vivid. Suggestive expressions connote more than they literally say. They suggest ideas and pictures to the mind of the hearer, which supplement the direct words of the speaker. When Dickens, in his Christmas Carol, says, "In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile," our minds complete the picture so deftly begun, a much more effective process than that of a minutely detailed description, because it leaves a unified, vivid impression, and that is what we need. Here is a present-day bit of suggestion. General Trinkle was a gnarly oak of a man, rough, solid, and safe. You always knew where to find him. Dickens presents Miss Peecher as a little pincushion, a little housewife, a little book, a little workbox, a little set of tables and weights and measures, and a little woman all in one. In his Knickerbocker's History of New York, Irving portrays Wouter van Twiller as a robustious beer barrel standing on skids. Whatever forms of description you neglect, be sure to master the art of suggestion. Description may be by a simple hint. Lowell notes a happy instance of the sort of picturing by intimation when he says of Chaucer, "Sometimes he describes amply by the merest hint, as where the friar, before setting himself down, drives away the cat. We know without need of more words that he has chosen the snuggest corner." Description may depict a thing by its effects. When the spectator's eye is dazzled and he shades it, says Moseley in his Essays, we form the idea of a splendid object. When his face turns pale, of a horrible one. From his quick wonder and admiration we form the idea of great beauty, from his silent awe of great majesty. Brief description may be by epithet. Blue-eyed, white-armed, laughter-loving are now conventional compounds, but they were fresh enough when Homer first conjoined them. The centuries have not yet improved upon wheels round, brazen, eight-spoked, or shields smooth, beautiful, brazen, well hammered. Observe the effective use of epithet in Will Levington Comfort's The Fighting Death, when he speaks of soldiers in a Philippine skirmish as being leached against a rock. Description uses figures of speech. Any advanced rhetoric will discuss their forms and give examples for guidance. This matter is most important, be assured. A brilliant yet carefully restrained figurative style, a style marked by brief, pungent, witty, and humorous comparisons and characterizations, is a wonderful resource for all kinds of platform work. Description may be direct. This statement is plain enough without exposition. Use your own judgment as to whether in picturing you had better proceed from a general view to the details, or first give the details and thus build up the general picture, but by all means, be brief. Note the vivid compactness of these delineations from Washington Irving's Knickerbocker. He was a short, square, brawny old gentleman, with a double chin, a mastiff mouth, and a broad copper nose, which was supposed in those days to have acquired its fiery hue from the constant neighborhood of his tobacco pipe. He was exactly 5 feet 6 inches in height, and 6 feet 5 inches in circumference. His head was a perfect sphere, and of such stupendous dimensions that Dame Nature, with all her sex's ingenuity, would have been puzzled to construct a neck capable of supporting it, wherefore she wisely declined the attempt, and settled it firmly on the top of his backbone, just between the shoulders. His body was of an oblong form, particularly capacious at bottom, which was wisely ordered by Providence, seeing that he was a man of sedentary habits, and very averse to the idle labor of walking. The foregoing is too long for the platform, but it is so good-humored, so full of delightful exaggeration, that it may well serve as a model of humorous character picturing, for here one inevitably sees the inner man in the outer. A direct description for platform use may be made vivid by the sparing use of the historical present. The following dramatic passage, accompanied by the most lively action, has lingered in the mind for 30 years after hearing Dr. T. DeWitt Talmage lecture on Big Blunders. The crack of the bat sounds clear even today. "Get ready the bats and take your positions. Now give us the ball. Too low. Don't strike. Too high. Don't strike. There it comes like lightning. Strike. Away it soars. Higher. Higher. Run. Another base. Faster. Faster. Good. All around at one stroke." Observe the remarkable way in which the lecturer fused speaker, audience, spectators, and players into one excited, ecstatic whole, just as you have found yourself starting forward in the seat at the delivery of the ball with 3 on and 2 down in the 9th inning. Notice too how, perhaps unconsciously, Talmage painted the scene in Homer's characteristic style, not as having already happened, but as happening before your eyes. If you have attended many travel talks, you must have been impressed by the painful extremes to which the lecturers go. With a few notable exceptions, their language is either over-ornate or crude. If you would learn the power of words to make scenery, yes, even houses, palpitate with poetry and human appeal, read Lafcadio Hearn, Robert Louis Stevenson, Pierre Loti, and Edmondo de Amicis. Blue distant, a mountain of carven stone appeared before them, the temple lifting to heaven its wilderness of chiseled pinnacles, flying to the sky the golden spray of its decorations. Lafcadio Hearn, Chinese Ghosts. The stars were clear, colored, and jewel-like, but not frosty. A faint silvery vapor stood for the Milky Way. All around me the black fir points stood upright and stock-still. By the whiteness of the pack-saddle I could see Modestine walking round and round at the length of her tether. I could hear her steadily munching at the sword, but there was not another sound save the indescribable quiet talk of the runnel over the stones. Robert Louis Stevenson, Travels with a Donkey. It was full autumn now, late autumn, with the nightfalls gloomy, and all things growing dark early in the old cottage, and all the Breton land looking sombre too. The very days seemed but twilight. Immeasurable clouds, slowly passing, would suddenly bring darkness at broad noon. The wind moaned constantly. It was like the sound of a great cathedral organ at a distance, but playing profane airs, or despairing dirges. At other times it would come close to the door, and lift up a howl like wild beasts. Pierre Loti, an Iceland fisherman. I see the great refectory, where a battalion might have drilled. I see the long tables, the 500 heads bent above the plates, the rapid motion of 500 forks, of 1,000 hands, and 16,000 teeth, the swarm of servants running here and there, called to, scolded, hurried, on every side at once. I hear the clatter of dishes, the deafening noise, the voices choked with food crying out, "Bread! Bread!" And I feel once more the formidable appetite, the Herculean strength of jaw, the exuberant life and spirits of those far-off days. Edmondo de Amicis, College Friends. Suggestions for the use of description. Decide on beginning a description what point of view you wish your hearers to take. One cannot see either a mountain or a man on all sides at once. Establish a viewpoint and do not shift without giving notice. Choose an attitude toward your subject. Shall it be idealized, caricatured, ridiculed, exaggerated, defended, or described impartially? Be sure of your mood too, for it will color the subject to be described. Melancholy will make a rose garden look gray. Adopt an order in which you will proceed. Do not shift backward and forward from near to far, remote to close in time, general to particular, large to small, important to unimportant, concrete to abstract, physical to mental, but follow your chosen order. Scattered and shifting observations produce hazy impressions just as a moving camera spoils the time exposure. Do not go into needless minutiae. Some details identify a thing with its class, while other details differentiate it from its class. Choose only the significant, suggestive characteristics, and bring those out with terse vividness. Learn a lesson from the few strokes used by the poster artist. In determining what to describe and what merely to name, seek to read the knowledge of your audience. The difference to them between the unknown and the known is a vital one also to you. Relentlessly cut out all ideas and words not necessary to produce the effect you desire. Each element in the mental picture either helps or hinders. Be sure they do not hinder, for they cannot be passively present in any discourse. Interruptions of the description to make side remarks are as powerful to destroy unity as are scattered descriptive phrases. The only visual impression that can be effective is one that is unified. In describing, try to call up the emotions you felt when first you saw the scene, and then try to reproduce those emotions in your hearers. Description is primarily emotional in its appeal. Nothing can be more deadly dull than a cold, unemotional outline, while nothing leaves a warmer impression than a glowing, spirited description. Give a swift and vivid general view at the close of the portrayal. First and final impressions remain the longest. The mind may be trained to take in the characteristic points of a subject, so as to view in a single scene, action, experience, or character, a unified impression of the whole. To describe a thing as a whole, you must first see it as a whole. Master that art, and you have mastered description to the last degree. Selections for practice. The homes of the people. I went to Washington the other day, and I stood on the Capitol Hill. My heart beat quick as I looked at the towering marble of my country's capital, and the mist gathered in my eyes as I thought of its tremendous significance, and the armies, and the treasury, and the judges, and the president, and the Congress, and the courts, and all that was gathered there. And I felt that the sun in all its course could not look down on a better sight than that majestic home of a republic that had taught the world its best lesson of liberty. And I felt that if honor and wisdom and justice abided therein, the world would at least owe to that great house in which the Ark of the Covenant of my country is lodged, its final uplifting and its regeneration. 2 days afterward, I went to visit a friend in the country, a modest man with a quiet country home. It was just a simple, unpretentious house, set about with big trees, encircled in meadow and rich field with the promise of harvest. The fragrance of the pink and hollyhock in the front yard was mingled with the aroma of the orchard and of the gardens, and resonant with the cluck of poultry and the hum of bees. Inside was quiet, cleanliness, thrift, and comfort. There was the old clock that had welcomed, in steady measure, every newcomer to the family, that had ticked the solemn requiem of the dead, and had kept company with the watcher at the bedside. There were the big restful beds, and the old open fireplace, and the old family Bible, thumbed with the fingers of hands long since still, and wet with the tears of eyes long since closed, holding the simple annals of the family and the heart and the conscience of the home. Outside there stood my friend, the master, a simple upright man, with no mortgage on his roof, no lien on his growing crops, master of his land and master of himself. There was his old father, an aged, trembling man, but happy in the heart and home of his son. And as they started to their home, the hands of the old man went down on the young man's shoulder, laying there the unspeakable blessing of the honored and grateful father, and ennobling it with the knighthood of the 5th commandment. And as they reached the door, the old mother came with the sunset falling fair on her face, and lighting up her deep, patient eyes, while her lips, trembling with the rich music of her heart, bade her husband and son welcome to their home. Beyond was the housewife, busy with her household cares, clean of heart and conscience, the buckler and helpmeet of her husband. Down the lane came the children, trooping home after the cows, seeking as truant birds do the quiet of their home nest. And I saw the night come down on that house, falling gently as the wings of the unseen dove. And the old man, while a startled bird called from the forest, and the trees were shrill with the cricket's cry, and the stars were swarming in the sky, got the family around him, and, taking the old Bible from the table, called them to their knees, the little baby hiding in the folds of his mother's dress, while he closed the record of that simple day by calling down God's benediction on that family and that home. And while I gazed, the vision of that marble capital faded. Forgotten were its treasures and its majesty, and I said, "Oh, surely here in the homes of the people are lodged at last the strength and the responsibility of this government, the hope and the promise of this republic." Henry W. Grady. Suggestive scenes. One thing in life calls for another. There is a fitness in events and places. The sight of a pleasant arbor puts it in our mind to sit there. One place suggests work, another idleness, a third early rising and long rambles in the dew. The effect of night, of any flowing water, of lighted cities, of the peep of day, of ships of the open ocean, calls up in the mind an army of anonymous desires and pleasures. Something we feel should happen, we know not what, yet we proceed in quest of it. And many of the happiest hours in life fleet by us in this vain attendance on the genius of the place and moment. It is thus that tracts of young fir and low rocks that reach into deep soundings particularly delight and torture me. Something must have happened in such places, and perhaps ages back, to members of my race, and when I was a child I tried to invent appropriate games for them, as I still try, just as vainly, to fit them with the proper story. Some places speak distinctly. Certain dank gardens cry aloud for a murder, certain old houses demand to be haunted, certain coasts are set aside for shipwreck. Other spots again seem to abide their destiny, suggestive and impenetrable, meeting malecho. The inn at Burford Bridge, with its arbours and green garden and silent, eddying river, though it is known already as the place where Keats wrote some of his Endymion and Nelson parted from his Emma, still seems to wait the coming of the appropriate legend. Within these ivied walls, behind these old green shutters, some further business smoulders, waiting for its hour. The old Hawes Inn at the Queen's Ferry makes a similar call upon my fancy. There it stands, apart from the town beside the pier, in a climate of its own, half inland, half marine, in front the ferry bubbling with the tide and the guardship swinging to her anchor, behind the old garden with the trees. Americans seek it already for the sake of Lovell and Oldbuck, who dined there at the beginning of the Antiquary. But you need not tell me. That is not all. There is some story, unrecorded or not yet complete, which must express the meaning of that inn more fully. I have lived both at the Hawes and Burford in a perpetual flutter, on the heel, as it seemed, of some adventure that should justify the place. But though the feeling had me to bed at night and called me again at morning in one unbroken round of pleasure and suspense, nothing befell me in either worth remark. The man or the hour had not yet come, but some day, I think, a boat shall put off from the Queen's Ferry, fraught with a dear cargo, and some frosty night a horseman, on a tragic errand, rattle with his whip upon the green shutters at the inn at Burford. R. L. Stevenson, A Gossip on Romance. From Midnight in London. Clang, 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 the fire bells! Bing, 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 the alarm! In an instant quiet turns to uproar, an outburst of noise, excitement, clamour. Bedlam broke loose. Bing, bing, bing! Rattle, clash and clatter. Open fly the doors, brave men mount their boxes. Bing, 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 they're off! The horses tear down the street like mad. Bing, bing, bing goes the gong. Get out of the track, the engines are coming! For God's sake, snatch that child from the road! On, wildly, resolutely, madly fly the steeds. Bing, bing, the gong. Away dash the horses on the wings of fevered fury. On whirls the machine, down streets, around corners, up this avenue and across that one, out into the very bowels of darkness, whiffing, wheezing, shooting a million sparks from the stack, paving the path of startled night with a galaxy of stars. Over the housetops to the north, a volcanic burst of flame shoots out, belching with blinding effect. The sky is ablaze. A tenement house is burning. 500 souls are in peril. Merciful heaven, spare the victims! Are the engines coming? Yes, here they are, dashing down the street. Look! The horses ride upon the wind, eyes bulging like balls of fire, nostrils wide open. A palpitating billow of fire, rolling, plunging, bounding, rising, falling, swelling, heaving, and with mad passion bursting its red-hot sides asunder, reaching out its arms, encircling, squeezing, grabbing up, swallowing everything before it with the hot, greedy mouth of an appalling monster. How the horses dash around the corner. Animal instinct, say you? Ay, more. Brute reason. Up the ladders, men! The towering building is buried in bloated banks of savage, biting elements. Forked tongues dart out and in, dodge here and there, up and down, and wind their cutting edges around every object. A crash, a dull explosive sound, and a puff of smoke leaps out. At the highest point upon the roof stands a dark figure in a desperate strait, the hands making frantic gestures, the arms swinging wildly, and then the body shoots off into frightful space, plunging upon the pavement with a revolting thud. The man's arm strikes a bystander as he darts down. The crowd shudders, sways, and utters a low murmur of pity and horror. The faint-hearted lookers-on hide their faces. One woman swoons away. "Poor fellow! Dead!" exclaims a labourer as he looks upon the man's body. "Aye, Joe, and I knew him well, too. He lived next door to me, 5 flights back. He leaves a widowed mother and 2 wee bits of orphans. I helped him bury his wife a fortnight ago. Ah, Joe, but it's hard lines for the orphans." A ghastly hour moves on, dragging its regiment of panic in its trail and leaving crimson blotches of cruelty along the path of night. "Are they all out, firemen?" "Aye, aye, sir." "No, they're not. There's a woman in the top window holding a child in her arms, over yonder in the right-hand corner. The ladders, there! £100 to the man who makes the rescue." A dozen start. One man, more supple than the others and reckless in his bravery, clambers to the top rung of the ladder. "Too short!" he cries. "Hoist another!" Up it goes. He mounts to the window, fastens the rope, lashes mother and babe, swings them off into ugly emptiness, and lets them down to be rescued by his comrades. "Bravo, firemen!" shouts the crowd. A crash breaks through the uproar of crackling timbers. "Look alive up there! Great God, the roof has fallen!" The walls sway, rock, and tumble in with a deafening roar. The spectators cease to breathe. The cold truth reveals itself. The fireman has been carried into the seething furnace. An old woman, bent with the weight of age, rushes through the fire line, shrieking, raving, and wringing her hands and opening her heart of grief. "Poor John, he was all I had! And a brave lad he was too. But he's gone now. He lost his own life in saving 2 more, and now he's there, away in there," she repeats, pointing to the cruel oven. The engines do their work. The flames die out. An eerie gloom hangs over the ruins like a formidable blackened pall. And the noon of night is past. Arden Jones Foster. Questions and answers. 1. Write 2 paragraphs on one of these: the racehorse, the motorboat, golfing, tennis. Let the first be pure exposition and the second pure description. 2. Select your own theme and do the same in 2 short extemporaneous speeches. 3. Deliver a short original address in the over-ornamented style. 4. A. Point out its defects. B. Recast it in a more effective style. C. Show how the one surpasses the other. 5. Make a list of 10 subjects which lend themselves to description in the style you prefer. 6. Deliver a 2-minute speech on any one of them, using chiefly, but not solely, description. 7. For 1 minute, look at any object, scene, action, picture, or person you choose. Take 2 minutes to arrange your thoughts, and then deliver a short description, all without making written notes. 8. In what sense is description more personal than exposition? 9. Explain the difference between a scientific and an artistic description. 10. In the style of Dickens and Irving, write 5 separate sentences describing 5 characters by means of suggestion, 1 sentence to each. 11. Describe a character by means of a hint after the manner of Chaucer. 12. Read aloud the following with special attention to gesture. His very throat was moral. You saw a good deal of it. You looked over a very low fence of white cravat, whereof no man had ever beheld the tie, for he fastened it behind, and there it lay, a valley between two jutting heights of color, serene and whiskerless before you. It seemed to say, on the part of Mr. Pecksniff, "There is no deception, ladies and gentlemen, all is peace. A holy calm pervades me." So did his hair, just grizzled with an iron gray, which was all brushed off his forehead and stood bolt upright, or slightly drooped in kindred action with his heavy eyelids. So did his person, which was sleek though free from corpulency. So did his manner, which was soft and oily. In a word, even his plain black suit and state of widower and dangling double eyeglass all tended to the same purpose, and cried aloud, "Behold the moral Pecksniff!" Charles Dickens, Martin Chuzzlewit. 13. Which of the following do you prefer, and why? She was a blooming lass of fresh 18, plump as a partridge, ripe and melting, and rosy-cheeked as one of her father's peaches. Irving. She was a splendidly feminine girl, as wholesome as a November pippin, and no more mysterious than a window pane. O. Henry. Small, shining, neat, methodical, and buxom was Miss Peecher, cherry-cheeked and tuneful of voice. Dickens. 14. Invent 5 epithets and apply them as you choose. 15. A. Make a list of 5 figures of speech. B. Define them. C. Give an example, preferably original, under each. 16. Pick out the figures of speech in the address by Grady. 17. Invent an original figure to take the place of anyone in Grady's speech. 18. What sort of figures do you find in the selection from Stevenson? 19. What methods of description does he seem to prefer? 20. Write and deliver, without notes and with descriptive gestures, a description in imitation of any of the authors quoted in this chapter. 21. Re-examine one of your past speeches and improve the descriptive work. Report on what faults you found to exist. 22. Deliver an extemporaneous speech describing any dramatic scene in the style of Midnight in London. 23. Describe an event in your favorite sport in the style of Dr. Talmage. Be careful to make the delivery effective. 24. Criticize, favorably or unfavorably, the descriptions of any travel talk you may have heard recently. 25. Deliver a brief original travel talk as though you were showing pictures. 26. Recast the talk and deliver it without pictures. End of section 20.